Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
I have 2 guns, one for each of you.
Firearms Friday.
As Thomas Jefferson stated, it is the right and duty of the people to be at all times armed.
Say hello to my little friend.
I say that the Second Amendment is, in order of importance, the First Amendment. The right to keep and bear arms is the one right that allows rights to exist at all.
The Michael Dukes Show. The right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Firearms.
From my cold, dead hands.
Friday.
This is my rifle, this is my gun, this is for fighting, this is for fun.
Firearms Friday.
Firearms Friday, your chance to sound off on issues of a 2A nature right here on the Michael Dukes Show, broadcasting live across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator, and live around the world on the interwebs at michaeldukeshow.com, where you'll find links to our audio-only stream, as well as links to our simulcast on Facebook, YouTube, and Rumble as well. Good morning, my friends. Welcome to our favorite day of the week, where we get a chance to talk about the thing that we love to talk about. That's right, guns and the Second Amendment and laws and so much more. Big show today. We got lots of stuff going on. This has been in the works for a while. Been trying to get this squared away. Our guests today include Professor David Yamane, who is a professor of sociology at Wake Forest University. He's also the author of several books, including one that I think he owes me a nickel for. It's called Gun Curious. And of course, you know, on this program, I've been using the term gun curious for about 15 years here. So we'll talk to him about that. I might have to break that nickel out of him here in just a little bit. But we're going to talk with him about a piece that he wrote for The Conversation and some of the other things that he's talked about in his book, including kind of the normalization of guns and how they are part of the American culture. He's got a really unique perspective that I can't wait to get into. In hour 2, we're going to do some headlines and some discussions, maybe some phone calls. And of course, as always on Friday, we're going to finish up on a lighter note by bringing Willie Waffle on, our weekend movie and entertainment critic. And yes, that's his real name. His parents must have hated him. Willie Waffle. I mean, why? Anyway, we're going to do that here this morning. But without further ado, let's jump into it, shall we? He was kind enough to get squared away with us, and he's out on the road today, enjoying a little summer free time on the road traveling. But he is here with us today. Dr. David Yamane joins us to discuss lots of good stuff, and let's just bring him on and get things started. Good morning, Professor. How are you, sir?
Good morning. I'm doing very well. I appreciate your persistence in working with me, getting this together. I'm really excited to chat with you.
Well, I appreciate that. I know it's been, it's tough when you got a lot of things going on, and I appreciate you sticking around with us and making it out here to the big radio program. All right, well, let's get started. This piece, our mutual friend Chris Chang had turned me onto this and sent me this piece originally, and this was written a while ago now. But it's in The Conversation, which is a journal for academics and talks about a lot of different things. But you write in this piece that you have 5 major observations to understand America's gun culture. And I'll be honest with you, I think that's always been part of the problem with guns in America from a political perspective, left versus right kind of perspective, is that people get stuck in a specific mindset, which of course is then fostered by the news media and the entertainment industry, highlighting the dangers of guns, but never focusing on any of the benefits or kind of the cultural norm that guns have become for mainstream America. And so I want to talk to you a bit about that first, and just, give me a little bit of background on this. Well, first, give me a little bit of background on yourself. You are you're a liberal professor, but who also is part of the gun culture, which is kind of an unusual thing. Tell us about your journey to that point first before we get into the article.
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, really kind of outside any notion of guns. They weren't a part of life in any significant way for me. And so what I wasn't really anti-gun, as I was very sort of insulated from guns and really ignorant about the role that they play in people's lives and in our society and culture. And as I, got into sociology, which is a very blue discipline, and I stayed my whole life in the university, which is a very blue institution. I was always safely sort of insulated from any uh, exposure to guns until I got to North Carolina when I moved to Wake Forest University, and I started meeting, people in my everyday life, people I played tennis with, people, my real estate agent, my significant other, and it seemed like everybody in North Carolina had guns except me. And so I had this sort of very dissonant kind of situation, and so I wanted to figure out how guns worked. I went out and tried shooting them, and lo and behold, I had a good time, and I became a gun owner shortly after that. So that was back in 2011, and then about 2012, I decided to put my professional efforts toward trying to understand this world that was very new and kind of exotic to me. So the past 14 years, I've been really deeply involved in and trying to understand and also participate in gun culture.
It's funny. It sounds like you had a little bit of FOMO there. Everybody's got a gun but me. I feel like I'm missing out on something, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it was kind of weird because I had so little exposure. And unlike most people, if you don't have direct exposure to guns, what you know about guns is the things you see on the news. So, I was sort of fearful of guns. And so the desire to try to shoot them wasn't really like, oh, I want to get into guns like everyone else. It was, what if I came across a gun someday in someone's house or on the street, or I don't know how it works. I don't know how to unload it. I don't know whether it's safe or not. And so that was my orientation going in. But after, as I say in my book, fewer than 50 rounds, I was really, challenged by trying to make the bullet go where I wanted it to go. And
Right.
so, I made a pretty quick transition, and it really exemplifies that idea that there really is no gun range.
Right. And it's funny because that's always what we've proselytized on the show here, is that if you want to get somebody interested and involved, just get them down to the range, because the majority of the time when people actually get to the range, they learn about, the safety aspects, how most gun owners are very safety conscious, and we've got the rules and we've got the training, we got the tips. But once you get them in the range and get them into the actual environment, and they overcome that kind of built up fear that the news media and the entertainment industry have kind of put into their minds on this, especially people who've never been exposed to guns personally before, you find that most of them have a great time. I mean, they really enjoy it. It's a unique pursuit that's exciting and thrilling and challenging for many people. And that's always my recommendation. Get them to the range and see how they feel then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I teach a sociology of guns seminar, and the first day of class, we take a field trip to the gun range. So we're talking usually around 16 students, probably 2/3 of them have never fired a gun before. And, they come into the situation, nervous, anxious. And, I say, that's an appropriate response or feeling that you should have if you're handling a dangerous tool. But I want to make you feel comfortable. I want to make it so that the first time they pull the trigger, it's totally voluntary. They want to do it. And, not all of them instantly, like I did, sort of become a gun owner, but, they come away from that experience at least understanding, oh, I didn't really like it, but I understand why someone else might. But most of them, they have a good time, and then they have to deal with that, again, as I did, the kind of cognitive dissonance of, wow, I don't really like guns and they're kind of dangerous, but I really just had a good time. Now, how do I make sense of that?
Yeah, and I think that's, again, part of that problem is that cognitive dissonance really messes some people up, because we've even seen reporters who've gone down and finally been taken to a range and not just been observers but participated, and we've seen some shifts in kind of some of the reporting and some of the different, it brings a new perspective to the thing, which again to me has always been a reason to advocate for more training and more exposure. Because if you have the training and you can overcome some of the built-in biases that are being pushed by the media and the news and things like that. All of a sudden, people find out that it's not necessarily as true as, or they just, the boogeyman has been put back in the closet. It's not as scary as it was, because ignorance breeds fear. And once you overcome that ignorance and you have real world experience, you realize it may be not as bad. Now, I wouldn't hand somebody who's never run a chainsaw and say, buck up this cord of wood, right? Here's a running chainsaw. Now go to. I would never do that, right? So that training is important. Like any other tool, a firearm is just a tool. It's dangerous by its very nature. But if you get some basic training, you can then use it all day long without any fear of repercussions, as long as you're following the rules and doing what you need to do. I think that's why training in this country should be accelerated. First, bringing them to the range, but making sure that they're trained as well in that regard.
Yeah. And I'm a huge proponent of training, and I talk in my book. The last chapter is about how I became responsibly armed, which was the training path that I took from basic instruction to more advanced courses. I think the challenge is that most of us who are gun owners, I shouldn't say most of us, many of us who are gun owners don't want this to be a governmentally required situation. So it really is a matter of encouraging people to voluntarily pursue training. And I think we got a ways to go in working on that.
No, that's a fine line, right? I mean, it's a fine line between, we don't want it to be government mandated, but at the same time, we want our culture to be responsible in and of itself. So we've got to not just, talk the talk, we've got to walk the walk. We've got to do, as you said, get the training and things like that. We have a axiom on the show here we call the rule of three. If you've decided to go out and go forth armed and concealed carry to protect yourself and protect others, that rule of three is in place, meaning if you should spend whatever the firearm costs, you should spend at least 3 times that amount. 1/3 for the firearm, 1/3 for the quality accessories, a good belt, a good holster, good tools, good training stuff, and then 1/3 for the actual classes and training that you need to make yourself aware of the laws and the tips and the tactics and how you should do it. That's what the commitment should be, because that's how important it is. You shouldn't go out and do those things until you have committed yourself to investing that much into this pursuit.
All I can say is amen to that. I agree with that entirely. And I know many gun trainers that I have encountered over the years are very frustrated when they see someone buying their 5th AR, but won't take a basic class to teach them how to draw a gun from a holster, even though they do concealed carry on a regular basis.
Yeah, I mean, it's insane. That's look, the gun is not some kind of mystical totem that protects you. I bought the gun, now I'm totally safe. I can stuff it in my back pocket, I can put it in my purse, I can do whatever. It's not a laser shield that protects you from the outside world. You have to get the training, you have to develop muscle memory, you have to get, into those things to understand how and why to use it. And understand also, again, the legalities, know what's going on, the use of force laws in your state or where you're residing, and those kind of things. You have to understand that to be able to effectively carry and be part of that. And I think that's it's super important. A lot of people talk about it, but I think it needs to be talked about more in regards to gun safety and to the gun culture itself.
Yeah. And, I go a step further, and I know not everybody comes with me on this, but I would also say that if you don't have that education and training, bringing a gun into your life or into your home can actually increase your risk of something bad happening, and so responsible storage or staging the gun if it's for self-defense, and really understanding how it works and how and when you can use it legally, and I would also say, ethically and morally, when can you use a gun in self-defense. So these are all very heavy considerations that I know a lot of people do take that responsibility very seriously, and there are others that I wish would take it more seriously.
No, absolutely. I think it's important. I think it's important. Professor David Yamane is our guest. He's the author of the book Gun Curious. We're going to get into his article here in just a second, but Lo and behold, the fastest radio show in history. We are already up to the first break, so we're going to continue here in just a second with Professor David Yamane, and we'll be back with more. This is the Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. It is Firearms Friday. We'll continue with David Yamane here in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. Back with more right after this.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, we are in the break right now. Professor Yamane is with us. If you have any questions for him, feel free to ask him in the chat room this morning as we go through. Walk me through that first day, David, as you went to the range. What was again, you had no real exposure coming from San Francisco and California, which, the kingdom of gun control. You had really no experience there. Walk me through a little bit that first day at the range. I mean, obviously there's some fear there, obviously, because that's kind of baked in from everything that we talked about. But walk me through that first day and kind of the feelings that you had on that.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing is that I wasn't extremely nervous. I think in part because I didn't really know what to expect, and the person who was teaching me was a trainer for the North Carolina Highway Patrol. So, he was very experienced in teaching people firearms, and he sort of set me at ease. He wasn't like, sort of the knife hand or anything. And so he, just kind of led me in. He had me load the magazine. He showed me how to put it in the gun and really just gave me a basic instruction on how to grip and aim the gun and said, go ahead. And so, I think that put me at ease. Now, in that moment, I have no direct memory of that first trigger pull, other than the fact that I completely missed the target. I'm like, where did I hit it on the target? I can't see. And, my wife and he were like, yeah, you weren't on the paper at all. So you got some work to do. But, instantly that challenge of saying, okay, I missed the target completely. I need to do this better. Right. And then, gives me a little advice on how to, grip stance, sight alignment, trigger press. And, by the end, I was just kind of walking the bullets into the center, more to the center of the target. I don't know that I ever got a bullseye, but, I think that, again, this kind of goes to that, what a person's first experience is like, how it's set up, can really affect the quality of their experience. And, the other thing is I didn't have super negative views of guns going in. It wasn't like I was anti-gun. I was just really ignorant. Whereas I think someone who comes in like, oh, guns are terrible, that's really going to shade their experience a lot.
Right.
And so I didn't have a lot of that baggage coming in. Mine really truly was kind of out of ignorance, some fear, but also a good bit of curiosity.
Right. Well, I often say, that Firearms Friday is not necessarily, I started this part of the show 15, 18 years ago, and I didn't start it. It's not specifically for pro-gun people, and it's not really for anti-gun people. That's where the term gun curious, because it's for those in the middle, the gun curious, who are like, I could take it, I could leave. They're a little curious, and they're not, necessarily in one camp or the other. And that's where I started using that term, because that's really what it's about. We want to bring people on, inundate them with facts instead of the emotional response we see in a lot of news articles and things like that, and let them make their own decisions. And of course, bringing them to the range shows them that. I'm really curious, when you do the sociology of guns, what's the reaction after that first day? I mean, do a bunch of people drop the class? Have you changed a lot of minds? What's it look like when you're done?
Yeah, well, because the range field trip is required, the shooting is not required, but every student has to go to this range field trip. They all know that going in. So most of the students are already predisposed. Anybody who doesn't want to go to the range is not taking the class. So I don't get a bunch of students dropping, but they do bring a range of pre-existing views to the range. And so first day is the range. Second class day, they have to submit a field trip reflection essay where they talk about their views coming in and then how the range field trip was as an experience for them. And I think the dominant experience that the students have really is of cognitive dissonance, because there's the students who are kind of pro-gun were like, hey, that was fun, I got to go to the range. Students who are just unmovable, they don't like the range trip. But there's the middle, like 80% of the class was like, that really made me think, right? I had a lot of fun, which was confusing to me because I know that guns are harmful. And it really sets a tone for the whole class, because from there, we don't just stay in people's personal experiences. We move into scholarship.
Hold on.
What the hell's an assault weapon?
If we could just figure out how to get all of the murder guns and the attack guns and not keep selling those to people and just sell protection guns, I think that would be great and solve a lot of problems.
Does this mean that if we hurt your feelings, you'd consider the Michael Dukes Show assault radio? Okay, we can live with that. Here's Michael Dukes.
We're continuing on Firearms Friday with Professor David Yamane, probably a guy who's got nothing but protection guns. I can't imagine he went to the store and looked at the tag and said, well, this says murder gun, I'll take this one. That's, by the way, that's Chris Chang's favorite liner for the show. He loves that. He giggles every time that one comes on this morning. Professor, let's get into this article because I think it's a brilliant article for people, especially reaching out to the gun curious. Again, on the conversation, I posted links up in the chat room. Guns in America, a liberal gun-owning sociologist offers 5 observations to understand America's culture of firearms. And I've often run into this. In fact, I've been asked by people from foreign countries when they discover what I do in the show, and they're like, you Americans and your fascination with guns, we just don't understand. And I just said, look, it's baked into Americans' DNA. The gun, the technology of the gun evolved with the country. I mean, that's when guns were really coming into prevalence. The rapid acceleration of gun technology over the course of 100 years was part of America's growing up, westward expansion, things like that. And of course, that westward expansion also helped solidify the gun as the ability for people to be able to protect themselves and their families and secure themselves as they went west. And so that's why I think it's so baked into us. But let's get into the first part of it. Basically, you say the 5 observations begin with guns are normal. And if you look at the news media, that's not how if you look at the politicians about people bitterly clinging to their guns and religion or whatever it is that they say, there's always that kind of attitude that guns are abnormal. But the truth is, in America, guns are normal.
Yeah. And this was the discovery I made when I moved to North Carolina, because, they're more normal. They're normal everywhere, but they're more commonly found in certain places than others. But as you say, this is part of the American reality from the beginning. And there's constantly been efforts by scholars like Michael Belisle to say, oh, America was never a gun culture, or guns were not commonly owned in early America. And it's just empirically untrue. Your experience may not involve guns, as mine didn't for most of my life. It doesn't mean that guns are not a normal part of lots of other people's lives. And so, this is very interesting because I use this language of guns are normal, and sometimes also normal people use guns. And a lot of people don't want me to use that language. So the editor of this piece in the conversation really said, is there some other way you can say that? And I said, I could find another way of saying it, but your reaction to me saying it that way is why I want to say it that way, because it challenges people to think about their pre-existing views of the deviance of guns.
And I agree, because, again, we've got 1 in 3 Americans owning guns. The new small arms survey brought the number of guns up in America to somewhere around 400 million. And I've often advocated that it's much higher. My estimates, just back of the napkin, and again, I've been in the gun culture since I was about 12 years old, is somewhere in the neighborhood of about 750 million guns, probably in America, based on NICS checks and bringbacks from World War II and Korea and things like. I'm sure that there's probably 700 million guns in America at least. So it is something that's normal. When you have 1 in 3 Americans who are part of this, that just shows you that obviously 1 in 3 Americans doesn't make it abnormal. It is in fact something that Americans are used to having, and most middle Americans, especially those in more rural environments, to them it's wholly natural.
Yeah. And, to add to that, we oftentimes just say, do you own a gun or not? But if you ask the question, as some people do, not just for among those people who don't currently own a gun, would you consider owning a gun? Well, then you're going to take half of the non-gun owners. So it's actually, it's more than 33%, but let's just say 33% of people own guns. Another 33% of people would consider owning guns. So really, it's only a minority of the population who say, I don't currently own guns, and I never would own guns. And we also know that some of those people would end up owning guns, like myself, because if you asked me that question when I was 35, I'd say, no, I don't currently own a gun, and I never would. And I'm in a different place. So,
yeah, it's a total change. And I think that is that's one of the things that we in the gun culture are fighting against, is kind of that making it to where it's not natural. It is deviant behavior. If you want to own a gun, it's deviance from the norm, when in truth, and statistically, it's not. It is normal that you want to be able to, and there's good reasons for it, but there seems to be this concerted effort on the part of the powers that be to try and push this narrative over, which again, that was kind of all shattered during COVID, right? We saw many people during COVID start to understand in real world consequences that owning a firearm was not just a nice to have in some cases, it was a must have, because they had to protect themselves.
Yeah, no, I agree entirely. And, I think as we work our way through the observations, I can, share some additional views on that.
Well, that brings us to gun culture 2.0, because again, gun culture is changing. And I think if you want to, you can describe what gun culture 2.0 is, but I think that during the COVID times, that acceleration, that it kind of accelerated that whole point thing. Give us a rundown of what you call gun culture 2.0.
Yeah, so this was, when I first got into firearms, I tried to learn as much as I could, as quickly as I could, about the big picture. And I came across a podcast that Michael Bain does, and he talked about this thing called gun culture 2.0, which was a shift in the emphasis of gun culture more towards self-defense, sort of newer people coming into gun culture because of that. And so I basically stole the concept of gun culture 2.0 from Michael, but it's a heuristic device. It's not perfect. It's not to say that there aren't other reasons people currently own guns. It's not to say that people haven't always owned guns for self-defense, but we can empirically track a shift in sort of the core, or the center of mass of gun culture, away from those traditional pursuits of hunting, recreational shooting, and collecting, more toward self-defense. So that's the shift from gun culture 1.0 to 2.0 is meant to kind of capture that broad shift.
Yeah. And I think you see a lot of that. Some of us have always loved guns simply for the beauty of the functionality, the kind of the art, the discovery, the historical relevance of guns. But again, even myself, like I said, I got my first gun when I was 12 years old, first hunting rifle. But I was always fascinated with the idea of it. And I think some of that comes from my immersion in Louis L'Amour at a very young age, and understanding his philosophy of what, that the gun was, helped again with westward expansion and protectionism against bad elements out there. That's kind of what all brought it to me in the world. And now we have, of course, concealed carry in many of the states. We've got somewhere over 30 states now that are have put on the books or considering constitutional carry. So that whole shift from, in the early 80s, I mean, there was no concealed carry. There was none of that. There was none of that discussion, to today, where it's constitutionally okay to be able to carry guns in most states. That's a full shift. That's a definite example of the gun culture 2.0.
Yeah. And when I first started doing this work, in 2012, I was talking about this shift towards shall issue from may issue. And I said, oh, yeah, and there's also this thing called permitless carry. And by the time my book came out in 2024, we're fully into the permitless carry, era. And so that's how quickly that shifted.
Yeah. It didn't take long. We bring back again, going back to the 5 points that you make in your article, and you talk about the diversity of gun. I know diversity is a bad word for many people, but now we're talking about the diversity of gun ownership. And again, we saw this again around COVID and things like that. We saw a huge push where a majority of NICS checks in 2021 were minorities, women, people with what you would not consider to be, they weren't these conservative white guys in the woods, right? This was a whole different crew. The diversity became real around those areas.
Yeah. And this may be my liberalism shining through because, diversity and inclusion are things that I value in gun culture. But it is the case that if you think about hunting and collecting and recreational shooting, those can be, we'd say, demographically limiting. You have to have space to hunt. You have to have certain resources to collect. But self-defense is a universal concern, and some people will respond to that concern by getting firearms. And so I think this promotes the diversity of gun ownership. And it also reminds us, that these, gun culture 2.0 isn't entirely new, because diverse people have always owned firearms for self-defense. And, lots of those early Second Amendment legal battles were over whether, freed slaves, African-American citizens could legally own firearms. And so, it's not entirely new, but I think that the shift towards gun culture 2.0 makes defensive firearms a more available response for more people today.
Yeah, and it brings it more again into the mainstream, where it again, that deviance that we talked about earlier, it's now kind of the normalization where, again, somebody who identifies as liberal or a minority member or a woman or somebody from the LGBT community. I mean, though, we see organizations like, the Pink Pistols are more prevalent. We see more, liberal organizations who are bringing groups together to arm themselves to be able to protect themselves from, crimes or hate crimes or whatever. We saw that with the Asian community during COVID, where they were feeling a lot of pressure and they came together. And so it's not just angry old white dudes in the woods buying guns anymore.
Yeah. And, I talked to quite a few people who are gun violence prevention or gun control advocates, and they really hate the idea of normalizing guns, because we talk a lot about, hey, maybe we should teach gun safety in school. Maybe we need people to understand more what responsible gun ownership is. And as much as they say they want people to be educated and trained as gun owners, when you start to expand what that could mean, the idea that, well, then you're going to normalize guns, that's very frightening to some people.
Yeah, and I've never really understood that. I've never understood that idea that somehow, I mean, again, we're going to get into this in the next segment with the final 2 points, but guns are tools like any other. it's like normalizing a skill saw. Why skill saw is just a normal tool. Along with the proper training, you can use it too. And I've never understood that unless. And again, I don't want to get too deep in the weeds here, because I know that philosophically you and I are probably on opposite sides of several things, but I've always kind of come to the idea that unless there's some kind of deeper agenda here or a belief factor that somehow that only through government can we progress as a society, and government's got the right idea, and there might be some rugged individualists out there who don't take to that kind of idea. They want to just be left alone and do their thing. And because they have firearms, they can't be compelled. And maybe that's kind of that deeper thing. I don't know how you feel about that, but that's kind of that's kind of the feeling that I get from some of these people when they start talking about that, and they continue to talk about the deviance of firearms ownership. And you're like, why are you so against me being able to protect myself? Is it because in your heart of hearts, you really would want, you believe that the government knows better than us how we should live our lives, and you don't want me to be able to push back against that?
Yeah. And here's, I think, an area where I've learned a lot in the 12, 13 years I've been hanging around with people in gun culture who do tend to be either more politically conservative or more libertarian than I am. I certainly in lots of parts of my life, would have had that reflexive liberal response of, here's a problem. What regulation or government action can we put into place to solve that problem?
Right.
And I think I've learned, that's become a lot more tempered in my exposure to people, who are more sort of individualistic or self-reliant or wary of the government. Even people to the political left of me are wary of the government more than I was. So, I was typical liberal, really, in the sense that I didn't see, some of the harms that can come from overregulation or overgovernance. And so I agree with you on what you just said, but 15 years ago, I think I would have disagreed a lot more strongly.
Right. All I can say is, Professor, welcome to the libertarian movement. All right, we're going to continue with Professor David Yamane here, author of the book Gun Curious, The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
All right, Professor David Yamane is our guest here. We're in the break right now, talking about it, and that, let's sidebar for a second just to kind of come back from that, because again, San Francisco, kind of liberal California, your liberal upbringing, you get exposed to this, and you start to see some, then you start to see things, like you said, your journey over the last dozen years or so. And again, maybe you're seeing some of the things that we talk about. I'm a libertarian, so I know that kind of everybody hates you, because you never fit the box that they want to put you in, But, maybe you start to see some of those things, and it does change your overall political philosophy in some ways. Do you think that's happened?
Yeah, I think it's something that I'm grappling with now. It's probably a particularly bad time in the political history of our country to be trying to fundamentally rethink your political views. But it's certainly, I see myself nodding my head at things that I would not have nodded my head at before, and so I think of it as being a long-term process. Unfortunately, we're kind of locked into this two-party system, which really becomes a frustration because, it's hard for me to throw in strongly for either political party. And yet, I have to vote. I don't have to vote. I want to vote. I want to make my political opinions known. And yet, I just feel a bit homeless in that sense politically.
Yeah. No, it's tough when you end up having to choose the lesser of two evils, because newsflash, that makes them both evil, right? I mean, that's what it comes down to when you look at it and you go, I don't identify necessarily with anybody here. I feel like I'm a little afloat. I'm adrift here on the wind. I can't identify necessarily with either candidate, like you said, with this two-party dichotomy, and it's really problematic. And I think, I think more and more people are coming to that. I remember back in must have been 2016, I think it was the first time ever that a Pew Research poll, which had been done checking the political winds in America, it was the first time ever that a plurality of Americans identified with libertarian values, more so than a Democrat and the Republicans. It was the first time Pew was they were doing a little bit of hand-wringing over it, like, oh my gosh, this is the first time ever. And yet I think you're seeing more and more of that. And even the millennial generation seems to be even more prone towards that than the previous. generations. But I think that as more and more people start to analyze this and have some accurate thought, they're not buying into the whole two-party dichotomy. There are the adherents to that for sure, but for the most part, I think you're seeing a lot of kind of that unwashed mass in the middle, the gun curious who are now the politically curious, who are basically saying, can I have a third option? Can I have a third choice?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree entirely. And it's, I think probably something that has to begin locally, because, any statewide office, much less national office, it's going to, third parties are going to be a non-starter. But, it'd certainly be possible in a local area, take people who are very disaffected with what the current choices are and find someone who could run third party. And, if you're trying to get on the county board or city council or even a local legislative district, that's more doable.
Yeah. If you hear if you hear a ding, Professor, that means that we're about to rejoin the radio, but we're about 2 minutes out here. I want to talk to you for just a second about the reaction of your compatriots in the more liberal establishment, in the, the ivory tower, the education industry. What's been the reaction of people around you as you have come out of the closet, so to speak, on being part of the gun culture and being enamored with guns? What's the overall reaction been?
Yeah, I think the overall reaction has been sort of one of indifference, which is, I feel, is very unfortunate because, even though I think my work is targeted toward, wherever you are politically in terms of guns, there's something there for you. But I really wanted to speak to my fellow liberals. I wanted to say, like, hey, maybe you need to rethink guns in the same way that I've rethought guns. And here are some, I think, logical and empirically based arguments. But, it's really not been received, not negatively. It's not like people are even out there criticizing it. It's just kind of like dropped like a lead balloon. Whereas I think the gun curious and more sort of pro-gun folks have had a very positive response to the work. So that's been a disappointment because, I really wish that my fellow liberals would take, guns more seriously, the reality, the normality, the pros, and, not to say that there are no cons, but, just take it seriously.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's good at least that they're not necessarily they're not coming at you, but at the same time, you wish it wasn't just ambivalence, and I could see that being part of the problem. All right, Professor David Yamane, our guest, we're about to rejoin the radio. One final segment dead ahead, the Michael Duke Show. Please like and share, follow, subscribe, ring the bell, do all that stuff. Here we go.
What the hell's an assault weapon? What isn't? If I assault you with a penguin, doesn't that make it an assault weapon? Does this mean that if we hurt your feelings, you'd consider the Michael Dukes Show assault radio? Okay, we can live with that. Here's Michael Dukes.
Yep, that's right. Those assault penguins, man, almost as bad as the trunk monkeys. I mean, those two things definitely assaulty, all of them. Professor David Yamane is our guest, author of the book Gun Curious. We're talking about his article in theconversation.com, where I will now post that link up in the chat room again one more time for those of you who missed it. His article entitled a liberal gun owning sociologist offers 5 observations to understand America's gun culture. We're down to number 4, and that is the fact that guns are lethal tools. Now, you think that this would kind of be self-evident, but it's something that we need to, I think that the key word here is tool, Professor, that it is a tool. It's not anything abhorrent. It's just a regular tool like anything else. As I said earlier, I wouldn't hand somebody a running chainsaw if they've never used one before and say, buck up this wood, because it's a dangerous tool. It's a tool, but it's dangerous, and there has to be some responsibility and training and things like that. And, we do have some statistics in this country, although I think a lot of times they're overblown and they're hyped more, in the negative light more than anything else.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of nuance, and I have to say, this was an opportunity for me to explain 13 years of research in about 800 words. So everything in this is very truncated, and I can't get into a lot of the sophisticated ways that we need to understand any kind of statistics about gun harm. But I think it is the case that by design, guns are lethal, and that this is why they're useful to us on the one hand, and it's also why in a bad situation it can make that situation fatal. Something that might have been an argument in a fist fight ends up in a death, or a fleeting moment of desperation becomes accomplished suicide. So, these are things that I think that we need to kind of face front and center, and that a lot of people are, especially on the suicide front. The United States doesn't have an extremely high suicide rate overall, but if as gun owners, I think we all have an interest in seeing to it that suicide by firearm is as small as possible, even if we know that it can never be zero.
That's why we need, like Walk the Talk America, Michael Sodini and Rob Pincus, these guys are all my friends. And, we talked about this a lot, that is attacking the mental health aspect of all this. And I think that's important. And we need to understand that guns are powerful tools, which is why suicides are so, in America, so they're so decisive, because the availability of firearms is out there. And so when people choose to commit suicide, they use the most readily available tool that happens to be the gun. The suicide rate, for example, in Japan is much higher, but they don't have the same access. And so the methods of suicide differ from jumping in front of trains to something else, But it seems like the downside to this is that the liberal establishment, the news media, they continue to focus on things like this, and they're always kind of conflating. They're always reporting, for example, they always lump in the suicides with gun violence, right? This term which in most people's minds is crime. They don't think about the suicide component of it. And I think it's kind of misleading, and it does a disservice. Statistically, it does a disservice to include all those numbers in there, because generally speaking, up to 60% of the numbers reported are suicides. If you look at it in a country of 330 million people with the number of actual homicides that we have, statistically, it's pretty small. Down to 0.00 kind of decimal points when you talk about the homicide rate versus the population. But if in the reporting, you'd think we lived in Mogadishu or something, compared to that. It's kind of misleading.
Yeah. And, I spend a lot of time, I don't spend as much time anymore, but I used to spend a lot of time kind of policing the way that people were talking about gun violence statistics, because I thought, we need more sophistication, not less. If we want, even if you think that, gun homicide is a social problem that needs to be addressed, you at least want to know where is that concentrated and what are the mechanisms, right? Because it varies dramatically from place to place and from person to person. So, the idea that there's an epidemic of gun violence suggests that it's just spreading readily, but it's really not spreading. Both, suicide and homicide with firearms are very demographically and geographically concentrated. And that just suggests different solutions than treating it as an overall public health problem, suggests.
Yeah. Well, especially when they're categorized, like you said, by area, that leads to different questions of there's something obviously wrong in this area. It has nothing to do with guns per se. It has to do with culture or societal issues or things like that. And that's what people, again, using the word epidemic in regards to gun violence does a complete and total disservice to the people who use it, and it's totally misleading. We're going to get on to the fifth question, though, there. And this, I'm just going to let you run with this. Your fifth point is guns are paradoxical. What do you mean by that?
That just means that, this is sort of born of frustration I had as I got into the study of guns and participating in gun culture, that everybody wants to make guns out as being either or, right? So that, guns are either the salvation of America or they're the doom of America, right? They're going to save democracy or doom democracy. They're going to save lives or they're going to take lives. And I really think that it's sort of both and neither at the same time, right? That guns are not any single thing. And so that's where I think the paradox is, and it helps us to understand both, point one, which is that guns are normal, right, and point four, which is that we do see harmful outcomes with guns. And I think that a true understanding of the complexity of guns requires seeing the paradox of guns.
Right. Seeing beyond the headlines of what we're seeing right now and understanding that I think the biggest part is the responsibility aspect of it, right? We as gun owners, we as people in the gun culture need to double down on our call for responsibility in all this, because if people were trained, if they understood that it's a tool, but a dangerous tool, if we did those things, it's not just, as I said earlier, a laser shield. I just buy a gun and now I'm safe. We've got to be able to put all this, and we've got to double down on that kind of stuff as members of the gun culture to be responsible to educate people on this, because otherwise all the education they're getting is from their TV or from the movies, from the entertainment or the news media. That's where they're getting their education. We have to be a counterbalance to that.
Yeah. And I think it can invite regulation, right? So if we don't self-regulate, then that's when the government's going to, feel the need or the opportunity to come in and, help us to be what we should be in any event. And I think that in my experience that people kind of shied away from that language of responsibility, not everybody, but, I think it should be embraced.
You just said the government's here to help us with, get back. Again, that goes back to the whole, we know better than you, so we're going to help you get right or whatever. We need to do it so that doesn't happen, because again, that just means a curtailment of freedoms and other things as well. Professor David Yamane is our guest. He's the author of the book Gun Curious. He's a professor of sociology at Wake Forest University. We're down to the last 90 seconds here, Professor, so I want to give you the floor. Final thoughts, anything I didn't touch on or anything else? I'd love to hear your thoughts here in the final minutes of the show.
Yeah, I appreciate the conversation, and I think what we can show is that even if you and I disagree politically on lots of other issues, that we can have a civil and productive conversation about the things that we care about. And I'd love to see more of that. I think that gun owners have an opportunity to show the best face of gun ownership, even in the face of critique and even hatred, and my friend Tony Simon always says, don't just meet people halfway, go 60%, right? And I think that doing that will help to further normalize guns and gun ownership. I know a lot of people don't feel like it's their job to do that, but part of the right to keep and bear arms is going to be based on people's broader cultural understandings of guns and gun owners.
We have to take responsibility as gun owners, and we've got to reach out and do that. Professor David Yamane, our guest. The Michael Duke Show continues. Hour 2 dead ahead. Back with more right after this. All right, Professor, I always like to give, it's just you, me, and 60 of our closest friends on the internet right now. I just want to give you a final bite at the apple here. Anything else? Anything you're working on? Any commentary on things that are happening right now? Anything else? I give you the final word here.
Yeah. What I'm working on now is trying to figure out what's next after having, published Gun Curious, because I do have a sort of Gun Culture 2.0 book with all of the things that didn't make it into Gun Curious. But I'm also, this year I went hunting for the first time. I went to the Smith & Wesson National Collectors Association meeting for the first time. And my focus on Gun Culture 2.0 really gave some other aspects of gun culture short shrift. And I'm thinking of, maybe shoring up that part and shining more of a light on hunting and its importance in our society and culture, and also, collecting, I think, and sport shooting. Yeah. So I think I'm dabbling in those areas and trying to see whether I have the energy it will take to do another 10 years on that.
Well, I applaud your open-mindedness on this. Like I said, a lot of times you bring somebody to a range and you expose them to something that heretofore they have been told is, again, deviant and evil and all these other things. And, a lot of times they just kind of get locked up within themselves. You obviously took a look at this and looked at it from an analytical perspective and faced those those inherent conflicts in yourself to come to a new conclusion. And I wish more people were like that. They had more accurate thought on this and more more self-analysis. But I mean, you're doing good work out there. And I appreciate you coming on board. And I look forward to hearing what you have to say about some of these other aspects of gun culture, whether it's collecting or competitive shooting or whatever it is, because I think, again, that is the most American of pursuits in the long run. I mean, again, it's something, this is baked into our DNA as Americans. We just can't get away from it. And I think there's an important aspect of continuing that DNA. So I look forward to seeing that. Brian just said, could you and Chris Chang team up for a 3-gun shoot? That would be
I would hold Chris back so badly. I don't know that he would want to team up on me. He's not, he'd have to have a pretty strong back to carry me through that.
Yeah, no, but it would be fun. But I appreciate the work you do, and like you said, we don't have to agree on everything. All we got to do is agree on 1 or 2 things and be able to come together and talk about it. And I appreciate that more than anything else, is that we can agree to disagree on some things, but some of the fundamental things like this right to keep and bear arms is important. And I appreciate you sticking it out there in that community, especially in the more liberal community, and being willing to take the slings and arrows, even though you said there's been more ambivalence than anything else. I appreciate you being able to do that. So thank you for coming on. And I would love to talk to you again in the future as well.
Yeah, you as well. Thanks for your persistence, and let's do it again sometime.
All right, you bet. Thank you so much, Professor David Yamane, author of the book Gun Curious. Thank you for coming on board and joining us today. All right, my friends. Wow, what a great opportunity here to talk with him. I thought that was a very good conversation. And again, you should go out and read this article, which I posted up in the chat room a couple times, but I'll post it one more time because that's the kind of guy I am. I suppose I should post it over on Rumble as well for you folks over on Rumble to take a look at. Yeah, so a good conversation with Professor Yamane there. Yeah, Greg just said shooting with Chris would be a learning experience. That would be fun. I'm trying to get Chris to come up here. I'm trying to get Chris to come up to Alaska and spend a little time with us here. But we'll see. We'll see. There's only so many hours in the day to get all that stuff done. Yes, this is a good time to make a dash to the coffee pot, Brian. You're 100% right. But you should be able to hear it across the room, right? Because you're going to just turn it up a little bit and you'll hear me there as we go through. All right, let me go back here and see what you guys are talking about. I see the Shelley Hughes announcement has got some of you chatting as well. She's running for governor. So we'll see what that brings. I think that makes 7 now. I think that makes 7 contenders for the governorship, which again, I don't know. I haven't chosen a candidate yet, but I think that there's been a lot of talk and not necessarily a lot of walk as of right now. I'm a little concerned. A lot of talk about how they're going to do things, but not much explanation about how those things are actually going to get accomplished. And that's with pretty much every candidate. Well, every candidate that I've spoken to. There's only a couple that I've spoken to right now. Of all the candidates that are out there, and of course I haven't interviewed Shelley about this yet, but Bernadette is so far in the lead. But again, I'm kind of in wait and see mode as to where this is going to go. But 7 candidates so far that have been either discussed or have thrown their hat in the ring. I don't know. It's going to be a hot mess. Yeah. The better question, says David, is who is not running for governor right now? I know, right? I mean, how many people out there are going to throw their hat in the ring on this thing? I don't know. All right, my friends. Well, let's get down to it. Let's get things ready to rock and roll. We got more coming up. The Michael Duke Show continues. Hour 2 is dead ahead. We're going to jump into it with headlines and more. That's all right now on your home for common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Duke Show.
I have 2 guns, one for each of you.
Firearms Friday.
As Thomas Jefferson stated, it is the right and duty of the people to be at all times armed.
Say hello to my little friend.
I say that the Second Amendment is, in order of importance, the First Amendment. The right to keep and bear arms is the one right that allows rights to exist at all.
The Michael Duke Show. The right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Not be infringed. Firearms.
From my cold, dead
Issues of a 2A nature right here on the Michael Duke Show. Welcome back to the program. It is hour 2 of the broadcast, and we are ready to rock and roll, dive down into some of the headlines from around the country in relation to the Second Amendment and guns and so much more. We've got some discussions coming up, and I have gone ahead, as I do on Friday, as is my wont on Friday, and we're opening up the phone lines to you, the listeners, at 319-527-3864. That's 319-527-3864. If you'd like to call into the program and talk to us today about anything that's related to firearms, et cetera, we'd love to hear from you. Firearms Friday is predicated on the idea that there's no such thing as a dumb gun question, and we are here to help you, those folks out there who may be a little gun curious. So if you've got questions about firearms, you just listen to Professor Yamane, and he's got you asking questions, or maybe you want to find out more. Now's the time to call in and be part of it. You could participate in the program in that way. Again, at 319-527-3864. We just finished up with Professor David Yamane, who is a sociology professor at Wake Forest University, and writing on his article about the gun culture and 5 points that he thinks Americans need to understand. I thought it was a very good piece, and I enjoyed talking to him about that. I love to hear about people's journey into the gun culture. That is that's an important piece to understand where people come from and how they got to where they're at. And I love that. I love the fact that he felt like he got to North Carolina from San Francisco, where he was born and raised here in the San Francisco area, and he was exposed to all these people around him who had guns. And it, as I said there earlier, it feels like he was suffering from a big bout of FOMO, fear of missing out, because everybody around him had guns and he didn't. And he wanted to know, what's the big deal? And it changed his mind. It changed his life. And I appreciate that kind of discussion about that kind of conversion. What makes people change? And we didn't get into it too much, but I kept mentioning it, but we didn't get any deeper into it. And I think part of the problem with firearms in America today rests solely on the coverage of guns and the discussions of guns as portrayed by the news media and the entertainment industry. And we've been seeing this for probably the last 35 or 40 years, a great example of that. The deviance of firearms is how things are portrayed. If you watch any kind of police procedural or show or whatever, anytime somebody who is not law enforcement, who is they are all the law enforcements in the television shows and movies seem to be kind of saintly, but any mainstream person, average citizen who just has a firearm is always portrayed, well, not always, but majority of the time is portrayed as some kind of deviant, whack job, right? Some kind of extremist in one form or another. Not just that they're an average citizen who just wants to be able to defend themselves, or just an average American who enjoys exercising their personal liberties or anything else. It's always with an eye of, kind of, this is some kind of deviant behavior. The news media and the talking heads in the news media, again, hyping and talking about numbers and statistics while always basically deceiving the public by including in those numbers things like suicides. And, that those numbers somehow would stop if you waved a magic wand and took all the guns away, that somehow those suicides would stop. Not, of course, acknowledging the fact that that the gun is just the tool that is the final solution for many of these people, that there's obviously deeper underlying problems there, that if they didn't have access to guns, they may not be they would still attempt it probably. They just may not be as successful because of the lethality of a firearm. Again, I point out that Japan has a higher suicide rate. It has one of the highest suicide rates in the world. And yet they don't have access to guns. So, it's not necessarily the tool, it's the underlying problem. And that goes back to a lot of what we're talking about. When you look at, and the professor mentioned that, when you look at the actual numbers in the country, and you could see that there's a concentration of these violence acts in geographic areas, you have to start asking questions about, why don't we see that same kind of violence in, if we see that in community A, why don't we see that same kind of violence in community B? And it could be, again, societal, cultural. It could have a lot to do with some of those things, but we fail to look at the underlying reasons for those. And I think that really does a disservice. I think it really does a disservice to all of America, but specifically more towards the gun culture as well. All right. We're going to continue here. I've got some stories to go on, but I see that Fred is up in the chat room. Excuse me, he's up in the phone. So we're going to go over to Fred, who's in Rhode Island. Fred, our good friend out there from the East Coast, joining us this morning to talk about things. Good morning, Fred. How are you? Can you hear me, Fred? Well, let me try that one more time. Let's
all participants are muted.
Well, my phone is working, but apparently Fred is not. Let me try this one more time. Can you hear me, Fred? Are you there? Well, we'll ask Fred to call back, because apparently it's his, I don't know if it's his phone or my phone, but we'll see what he's got going on. We'll get Fred to try and call back here and talk about some of these things. Big news out of the Ninth Circuit Court. Now we often refer to the Ninth Circuit as the Ninth Circus, because they, because there's a bunch of clowns there. That's why the Ninth Circus Court of Appeals. The Ninth Circuit has now declared California's background check on ammo purchases unconstitutional. Now, I don't know if you've been keeping up with this, but California had an ammunition background check regime, which basically would require any person that wanted to go in and purchase ammunition to get a background check, and not just a single time background check to be able to get like a ammo card or something like that. No. Anytime they wanted to purchase ammunition, they had to go through this background check. Any time. And then it had a requirement that after they received the approval for the background check, it was only valid for 18 hours. So once you got it back, you had 18 hours to buy the ammo or you were done. And I can't think of anything more ridiculous than that, quite honestly. But here you go. When it was all said and done, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals has upheld the injunction first delivered by U.S. District Court Judge Robert Benitez, or as we like to call him around here, Saint Benitez. He does. So we're going to get into some details on that. Let's go over here and see if my phones are working properly now. I mean, I can only hope so. Let's go over here and see what's going on. Fred is on the line from over there from excuse me, from Rhode Island. Can you hear me, Fred?
Yeah, that play. Hear me right now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Fred. What's happening, my friend?
Your second time's always a charm.
Yeah, always the charm.
Anyway, yeah. Professor Yamane, he's dead on. He's spot on. He's 100% correct. You know, the thing is, though, you know, the one point that's never really brought up, it's not the tool. It's never the tool. It's the individual. So what you have, individuals who are, you know, they have either evil or they have, you know, some type of an agenda to, you know, to commit crime or, you know, some type of an act. And that is where the concentration. If you're going to solve the problem, go to the source and solve the problem there. Don't try to pussyfoot around the perimeter and avoid the issue of really trying to solve anything. And they're pushing another agenda, which is peculiar. Which, as far as guns go, it's a lot of it's political. It's all political. It's all to put a feather in some politician's cap and say, "Look what I did. Look how wonderful I am. I saved the whole world." Realistically,
right.
You know, the sky's falling in on them, and they haven't got enough brains to look up and see that it's happening. But you know, what are you going to do as far as that goes? You know, you have to realize you have to deal with the reality of that. You know, you deal with the facts. You deal with the criminal element. You take care of that. And the problem will definitely I think it will self-correct.
No, I mean, I agree. I think one of the big problems here is, of course, that we're not facing the core of the issue. It's like I was talking about with suicides. You know, we're not facing the underlying issue with suicides, which of course is, you know, mental health crises and a lot of these other things. Instead of focusing on what's the causation, they're focusing on the outcome in the end and saying, well, these firearms, if they were just gone, then people won't do that. No, people have been you know, they've been removing themselves from the gene pool for years, for decades, for centuries. The firearm just makes it more sure. It doesn't mean it's not the reason. The reason is the person, and whether that's a self-harm issue or harming somebody else, we've had these kind of actions for 1,000 years. Why aren't we focusing on the real reason, the motivational aspect behind it, rather than the actual outcome, right, Fred?
Oh, absolutely. From a sociological point of view, not that I'm a sociologist or anything, but I think I've been around enough years to be able to put two and two together and to tie my own shoelaces and all kinds of neat things like that on my own. The observations that I've come away with is that, you know, you're dealing with the elements of society in, you know, the 21st century, which has been basically the same thing in the 20th century: drugs, crime, crazies. You know, crazy people and, you know, mental imbalance and just criminal activity. I mean, whatever you do, whether it be a firearm or a knife or a hammer or an axe or, you know, a log or a fist or what, you know, the act of violence stems from one of those four elements. I mean, you know, you sit there and you look at, I think anything that happens is going to, crime-wise, whether, you know, as far as people being injured and killed, relates back to one of those four categories.
Right.
You know, like I just mentioned. So I think if you deal with, and then of course, the more concentrated you are in like a society, you know, like cities or like New York and Chicago, high concentrations, high amount of drug activity, high amount of gang activity, high criminal activity, because of the concentration of people, you know, that in that small area, you're going to wind up with more crimes taking place. And what are they going to use? They're going to use firearms. They use everything they get their hands on, which is the kind of like the whole stupidity of gun control. Yeah, we take care of the guns. Well, look what happened in England. They get rid of the guns, and they got knives.
Right.
Get rid of knives, they use hammers. They use whatever they get their hands on. That's not going to make the problem go away.
Right.
It just changes the venue of how the crime is committed. And it isn't any better or worse with a firearm. Crime is crime, injury is injury, and death is death.
No, I mean, I agree with that, that we, and we should be focusing on the causation, on the root causes of these things, and whether it is societal, poverty, the loss of the nuclear family, the violence and the gang mentality in the inner cities, all these kind of things, all these things that they keep trying to do at a legislative level, where they're basically changing the laws. All that's doing is really affecting law-abiding citizens. And that's the that's the problem here. We're never acknowledging the fact that criminals, by their very definition, are going to break the law. And that if you put one more law on the books, it's really not going to slow them down much. This idea that somehow if we have gun control, it will be some kind of utopian society but we see it in England. There's still a gun problem in England. There's still a gun problem in Australia. There's still, they just had a mass shooting in, what was a European country, Austria or something like that here a month ago. It still happens in these countries where they tout the fact that they have the most stringent gun laws in the world. It still happens. This is not going to fix anything. All you're going to do is affect honest, legal, law-abiding citizens. And unfortunately, it starts to me to appear to be that that's by design, that they want to disarm law-abiding citizens. That's where things start to get sketchy.
You're spot on there, Mike. Like I said, I've been saying that for a while. It's either international influence and or globalist and or some other reason which isn't really obvious to most people. But I think if you do a little digging, you can pretty much come up with a lot of evidence that backs that up. And maybe one day they'll get around to actually doing that, because I really like to see these backstabbing creeps that are sitting there trying to take over society or trying to rule over society as to what they're trying to do, and get rid of, basically transform America into some third world cesspool.
Right.
This is I think what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
In so many ways.
Yeah. Fred, give us an update on what's happening in Rhode Island with your guys' assault weapons ban and everything. What's going on out there?
Well, basically nothing's really changed. They passed a law. We have till January 1 of 2026 before it actually goes into effect. And I guess the story that keeps coming back is they really can't do anything with it until day one of the law taking effect. Now, I know that there are exceptions to that, but apparently the state Supreme Court has backed that up and says, well, we're not even going to look at it till day one of the law taking effect, and then maybe they'll take a look at it. However, Rhode Island politics being what it is, I have my suspicions that a lot of, like you say, the halls of justice, most of the justices handle in the halls. I think there's a lot of that going on.
Right.
That a lot of people aren't even aware of.
Well,
I don't know. I have my doubts. I'm basically, if it gets much worse than this, I'll be packing it up and moving somewhere else.
Well,
I don't think I'm going to put up with too much of this nonsense.
Alaska would always welcome you, Fred. You're always welcome to come up here and enjoy yourself in one of the last free states in the country. We appreciate you calling in, though, this morning. Thanks for being part of the show. We appreciate it. Have a good weekend, okay?
You have a good week, Mike. Take care.
Thanks so much. Fred calling in from Rhode Island. That brings us over to the next break. We're going to get into this Ninth Circuit Court decision here on the other side. We'll continue to talk about that. And the phone lines are open. If you want to comment on anything we've talked about today, the professor or Fred's comments or anything else, the phone number to call, 319-527-3864. 319-527-3864. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Back with more in just a moment.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes on Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay. In the break right now, let me come back to the chat room to see what else you guys have been talking about. You guys have been awful quiet. awful quiet. Now you're talking about hats, all because Greg made a snarky comment about buying Alaska hats, and now everybody's talking about hats. You guys, crazy stuff. Hopefully Brian got to the coffee pot and made it back with a fresh cup of Joe. That's all I'm asking. That's all I'm asking for right now. Both Greg and Brian enjoyed the conversation with the professor, and I'm glad. I'm hoping to have him back on. It's interesting to talk to somebody who has a different political bent than you do, especially when you do find an area of agreement, something like this. It really makes you think, what other areas might we agree on? And what could we do to try and bring him around? I mean, Professor Yamane calls himself, a liberal, but I have a feeling that he's a little bit more libertarian in nature than liberal at this point. After you've been in the gun culture for 12 years, 14 years, and you kind of have to pull some of those, you have to kind of start to pull back on some of your ideals and feelings. And again, even just his commentary on not wanting the government to mandate the training, that, not wanting that kind of governmental overreach, I think was telling to me. I feel like he's more libertarian in bent than anything else. So it's good. It's good to see. It's, got another one. Got another one. That's what we want to see there. Yeah. Jeannie says he's a libertarian. He's he's not liberal. He's a libertarian. And I guess that's one of the benefits of being the part of the libertarian movement, is that it's a big tent. You know what I mean? It's a big tent. And a lot of people could participate. But I think I'll be honest with you, I think more and more people, if we did not have this two-party dichotomy, if we did not have this binary choice of one or the other, that you'd find that most people probably fell into that libertarian type mindset of essentially, we just want to be left alone. You should be able to do whatever you want to do, right up into the point of where your freedoms interfere with somebody else's freedoms. That's what it should be about. To me, that's always been the ideal. And again, I've mentioned Louis L'Amour several times in the last week or so. I think it's because it's been on my mind. But that was really my first exposure to that idea, is in his stories of that westward expansion and the frontier, and the idea that people just wanted to be left alone. And as long as they weren't hurting anybody else, it was okay. Of course, Louis L'Amour always had a character who found out that they could hurt somebody else and get away with it. And that's where his hero would come in and fix the situation to put it back to normal. That's, there's my childhood right there in the big thing. How many people out there how many people in the chat room have read Louis L'Amour to any great extent? I mean, even just one book. I think I've read literally everything he's ever written. I think I even got around to his son, Beau L'Amour, put out several posthumous, what do you call it? Short stories. It was a lot of story ideas that he had out there. I haven't had enough coffee yet today. Basically, they're concordances of his story starter ideas or short stories or everything. I think I've read pretty much everything he's ever written. And I would attribute most of my education, and I'm using that with air quotes, education, to Louis L'Amour. I still remember that I wrote an essay in 7th grade, I guess, 6th or 7th grade. No, maybe it was 8th grade, because it was when that's how I ended up in AP English, of all things, in high school. And I was like, how the hell did I get an AP English? It was because I'd written an essay in 8th grade about a person that you could spend a day with, and who would it be? And I wrote the essay about Tel Sackett, who is one of the most famous characters from the Louis L'Amour novels. And that apparently landed me there. But I was reading those books, for a period of probably 2 or 3 years, I would only read. I was not interested in any other books. And I read all of them. Jeannie says she said me, and she said she reads Lamore and Hillerman, Tony Hillerman. Another great one. It's like Craig Johnson. He's more of a modern day. That's the Longmire author. That's also a good set of books. But I don't know. There's just something about Lamore that is kind of the black and white, kind of that black and white, good guy versus bad guy, the stereotypical kind of story. It's an interesting thing. Hey, welcome back to the program. I didn't, my little reminder ding is not working. And so we just ran the clock out and we're back on the show because I wasn't paying attention. But I still got to play the thing just because I love it.
What the hell is an assault weapon? Does that mean that if we hurt your feelings, you should consider the Michael Dukes Show assault radio? Okay, we can accept that. Here's Michael Dukes. Kind of a dick, but somewhat funny.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was just trying to bring some normalcy back. We for those of you, and I don't know how long ago we rejoined here, but we were talking about Louis L'Amour and how he was a pivotal cornerstone builder of my philosophy in life, and it probably was what sparked my love of guns early on. Is that I was reading about L'Amour and reading his stories and reading, what's the Firefly thing, because that always resonated with me. The show Firefly, that. Something about taking a gun was, how you protected yourself and got your things. And then the gun is how you kept your stuff. That kind of, it was just kind of that philosophy of you were basically using it to protect yourselves and to keep what you got. And I think that, I think every one of those books, even the Californios, which is one of his books that gets it's got like a supernatural bent to it, which is pretty cool, by the way. If you haven't read the Californios, it's one of my favorite Louis L'Amour books. Anyway, it's what I encouraged all my kids. Now, none of them picked them up like I did and read them all. I think my sons both read a couple of them, and they're like, "Oh, they were okay." I mean, maybe it's just a different time, but for me, that was my escape, and it was a look into a little bit of a different world. Reading those books. It was amazing. All right. Sorry. I got, he says, Greg just said, I named my first son after a character in the book Flint. That's great. That's great. All right. Where was I? Oh, we were talking about the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. So this 3-judge panel, voted 2-1 to overturn the California's background check requirement on the sales of ammunition. Basically, the judges declared in the majority that the background scheme, quote, meaningfully constrains the right to keep operable arms. And this background check, if you weren't paying attention to this and you're just hearing about this now, I mean, just prepare to be shocked. So again, the ammunition background check regime regulates all ammunition acquired by California residents. The regime applies not only to every transaction in California, but also to ammunition purchases by residents outside the state. So it wasn't just that you couldn't, you had to go through a background check every time before each time you bought ammunition. You couldn't even go to a neighboring state and buy ammunition and bring it into the state. That was totally illegal. And then again, it had that time frame on it. After approval, a California resident may be required to purchase ammunition during a specific time period, i.e., 18 hours after passing the check. The regime applies to all types of ammunition, and California residents cannot avoid the background checks by taking advantage of internet or out-of-state sales. Rather, out-of-state purchases are subject to additional delays and fees. Given the delays and fees associated with California's ammunition background check regime and a wide range of transactions to which it applies, we, the court, conclude that in all applications, the regime meaningfully constrains California residents' right to keep and bear arms. Thus, it is not a presumptively lawful regulatory measure. I mean, this is huge news. This is huge news. Now, the Attorney General of California, Bonta is his name, Rob Bonta, is most certainly going to try and appeal this. He's going to try and appeal it from the 3-judge panel to an en banc panel, which means basically all the judges in that circuit to sit down and do it. Now, whether that has more of a chance or not, I don't know. The Ninth Circuit is kind of weird because we've seen a lot of these 3-judge panels. We've seen a lot of these 3-judge panels vote in a certain way, and then we see an en banc review of it, and it turns out later that that the en banc panel upheld what the 3-judge panel is. So I don't know. I can't give you a definitive answer as to whether or not that's going to happen. But it is more good news for now, as that regime has been repealed. For now, anyway. Wow, I'm up against the break already. Willie's going to be calling here in just a second. We got to go. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Okay. I don't know why I keep pushing the timer, because the timer's not helping me. Yeah, the ding comes and the ding goes. The dingoes ate my baby. All right. Name that film if you can. Dingoes ate my baby. LD Howard says Down the Long Hills, Conager, Sackett's. Love those books. You know, some of my favorite ones too were some of the early ones, like Where the Fair Wind Blows, when it was the story of the original Sackett clan coming from England, and the stories of them fighting their way out of merry old England to the what was then the burgeoning colonies of the U.S. Those are some great books too. And the one that where he Last of the Breed is the story of the U-2 spy plane pilot who goes down in Russia and makes his way back to the Bering Straits to get over to Alaska. There's so many good books that he has written. His stories about the Widgeon pilot, the Goose pilot in World War II in the Pacific. He wrote several stories along those lines too, of boondocking it amongst the islands there in an amphibious plane. And man, I could talk about that all day. Jeannie says, in regards to the ammunition purchases out of state in California, Nevada Cabela's took a huge hit. The ammo law kept the onslaught of Californians crippled. Cabela's lost millions. Yeah, I mean, they were selling, Nevada, Arizona. I mean, they were selling tons of stuff to Californios who would basically come across the book because it was just easier. Why would you do it? And now California wants to regulate what you can buy out of state and bring in. I mean, what are they going to have, checkpoints at the border? No, you know what they did? Because California actually was doing this. California police, and I don't remember if it was the California Highway Patrol or the State Investigative Division or whatever, they would actually put officers in the parking lots of places like Cabela's or Bass Pro or Dick's or wherever that they would go out of state. They'd actually put unmarked California police officers in those states taking pictures of people with California license plates, and then they would stop them on the other side of the border after they got back in and search their vehicles to see if they bought ammunition. I mean, they literally, what kind of police state stuff are you looking at when you see things like that? I stopped by a Kroger's to buy a Coke and a watermelon, and you're going to stop me on did I buy ammo while I was there? I mean, it's This is what California was doing. Taxpayer dollars paying for officers to go to other states and stake out parking lots of sporting goods stores to see if anybody actually bought anything. What kind of nutty madness is that? I mean, I'll be honest with you. Why in the hell, let me change my lighting here. Why in the hell would anybody ever want to live in a state like that? I don't care how beautiful it is. I don't care how pretty it is. I don't care why would you ever want to live in a state like, and then of course we got the whole fire thing and I just saw a expose a couple days ago, these houses that burned down in the fires, right? They're estimating now that in some cases it will take up to 4 years for them to rebuild these houses. 4 years. Now, don't forget, state of California is still collecting property taxes and everything else. These people have to live somewhere else. They've lost 4 years. And in some cases, the California governor, old Newscum, he is now talking about acquiring big tracts of these lands to create low-income housing. He apparently took a note from the pages of the Hawaii governor after the whole Lahaina fire thing, where they were talking about taking property from people to create low-income housing. I mean, how in America do we get to this point? How did we get to this point where they're actually going over state lines to watch people shop at a store and then stop them on the way back? I mean, that is madness. You wonder why there's a huge outflow from California. I think people have finally, they finally had it. They finally are like, no, I can't do it anymore. Can't do it anymore. Anyway, Jeannie just said, I got stopped with Washington plates going through the USDA checkpoint from Nevada into California. Yeah, I mean, why would we travel there? Why? All right, we're about to it. Let's get things going on. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. My phone's buzzing. It's time for Willie. Let's lighten it up. Here we go. Okay, the weekend is here. Willie Waffle, wafflemovies.com comes on board. I'm eventually going to break myself of that habit, Willie. I'm sorry. I just don't know. I mean, okay. Maybe I should go buy wafflemovies.com. Do you even have that?
I still own it.
Okay.
I own the URL. I'm not giving that up.
Okay.
I just don't do anything with it. So eventually they're going to shut me down.
Well, no,
I don't know.
No, they'll let you.
That used to be a thing.
You'll pay. As long as you pay, they don't care. You can hold on to it for as long as you want. That's all that matters. Right?
Well, then it's mine until the bitter end. Until I'm just not on this mortal coil anymore.
Well, until the Waffle House decides that they're going to show Sunday matinee movies in the Waffle House, and then they're going to offer you $1 million for the URL, wafflemovies.com. That'll be it. All right. Well, Willie Waffle.
God, that'd be nice,
wouldn't it? I wish.
That'd be so nice.
I wish I was sitting on some of these old domain names when they first came out. That was a big thing, right? They were squatters that went out.
Oh yeah.
When the internet was first young and new, and a bunch of people went out, and I mean, they may have spent $1,000 or something. They bought all these domain names, and then companies were like, "Well, this internet thing's here to stay." And then they went to get their domains, and they're like, "Oh, somebody else owns it already."
Oh yeah. There was even a time I was actually approached to be part of an investment group that was going to buy just tons of domains with the idea and the hope that, a couple of them will be of some value and all the investors will benefit from that. Yeah. And I did not join in because it didn't sound like it was going to go well.
Well, I mean, some people made big money on it, but I think it was one of those things where
I know.
You had to be in there early to make it happen. All right. Well, let's get into the news. We got the movie. We got a sad story about the movies that you were going to review this week, and we'll get to that when we get there. But kind of a slow news week, but it starts off on kind of a sad note. This was a tough week for stardom and fandom out there. Let's see, Chuck Mangione died. Hulk Hogan died, and Ozzy Osbourne died. I mean, it's like this has been a rough week for the entertainment world.
It has, and I'll throw in there also Malcolm Jamal Warner from the Cosby Show.
Oh, that's right.
This was, yeah. I mean, these are icons of the '80s, folks. I mean, these are all big icons. I mean, Malcolm Jamal Warner, really, one of the stars of the Cosby Show, and somebody who's like tried to move forward from the whole Cosby scandal and everything that we've learned about Bill Cosby. He's tried to kind of, portray a positive side of the rest of the show and the rest of the cast. And, he unfortunately had a horrible accidental drowning when he was swimming in Costa Rica. He just, the water, the current was too strong and he got swept up in it. So, yeah. And then Ozzy Osbourne, Ozzy Osbourne, come on. Ozzy Osbourne, one of the founding fathers of heavy metal. Let's be honest.
No, he
was there. He was one of the people who created it. He's
a huge influence on music. No matter what you say. I mean, if you were looking for semi-immortality, I guess that would be it. But he was rough. It was so rough at the end there, Parkinson's and everything else. But it's a tough situation. And then of course Hulk Hogan. That was crazy. And I guess on a personal note, the only positive that I found out of that is that the guy, he found religion here about 6 months ago and was saved. So I felt pretty good about that, but it's and you really nailed it there. These are all guys from the 80s. And I'm like, I feel so old right now because
I know
this is all the stuff from my high school days, as we went through it. I'm like, oh man.
Yeah, and I think, I'm kind of curious to see how people are going to react to the Hulk Hogan death. Hulk Hogan is a very controversial figure for anybody, and I'm a hardcore wrestling fan. I mean, you and I have talked about that before. There are a lot of great things that he did. I mean, he really was part of propelling professional wrestling to the level that it is now and the popularity that it is now, and made it a business that will make a ton of money. But he also had a seedier side. I don't know how else to put it. There were all the allegations of the steroid use. There was the controversy years ago when he was caught on tape saying racist things.
Right.
And I'll even throw out there. And I think this is kind of getting back to his history as a professional wrestler. Jesse Ventura is very, very, very openly talks about how Hulk Hogan ruined the chance for a professional wrestlers union. And Jesse Ventura hates him to this day for basically screwing over Jesse Ventura and the rest of the wrestlers.
Yeah.
So, Hulk Hogan's got a checkered past, and I think we're probably going to hear a lot about that over the next few days.
Yeah, no, and I'm sure we'll see a biopic that'll be coming out here in the near future and everything else. But I mean,
there was supposed to be one.
Yeah,
there was one that was in the works with Hemsworth, with Thor.
Chris
Hemsworth.
Hemsworth.
Yeah. Chris Hemsworth was part of a biopic that they were working on about Hulk Hogan, and it kind of fell apart. I wonder if it'll come back now.
Well, it'd be interesting if it was. I mean, the guy basically carried the WWF for a while there on his own shoulders. I mean, he was the face of all wrestling. So, and then he did the movie thing, and then he did the TV thing. But yeah, there's always the shadier side that people don't know about. But it'll be, sad for his family, sad for his kids and everything else. But everybody gets there, I guess, eventually in the end. Nobody makes it out alive. So I guess that's where we're going to go on this. All right. Well, let's go on to The Voice. Now, I've only seen this show because my wife has made me watch the show when Blake Shelton was a judge because she really likes Blake Shelton and he always picks some interesting things and all that. But what's coming on with The Voice? This thing's been going on forever.
Yeah, we're in season 29, and I think NBC realizes they got to pull out a lot of stops to keep getting the buzz and to make the show as popular as it once was. So they're bringing back Kelly Clarkson, John Legend, and Adam Levine to be coaches, but they're revamping the show format. Okay, it's going to be the Voice Battle of Champions because all three of these coaches have won a season, and they're going to have a new format with all sorts of twists and turns, and And I was reading them, and I'm like, I don't even understand what they're going to do. But it sounds like they're really messing things up big time. And the one thing that stood out to me, and I think the one thing that really was interesting to me, was they're going to have this group of super fans, hardcore voice fans, who will have a vote at some point in the competition. Wait, that means that they're going to freeze out the viewers?
Okay. All right. Well, we'll have to see. Is this coming out this year, or when's it coming out?
This is spring of 2026. They will be back in the spring of 2026. I would assume. Well, let's see. Who does NBC have the Super Bowl next year? It'd be after the Super Bowl, I bet.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll be. I mean, I won't be, but Terry will probably be watching for that.
She will make you watch it. It will be on. You will be subjected to it. You will be hearing the music. You will be in your chair going, let me turn my chair the other way so I don't have to watch.
Exactly. No, but since there's no Blake Sheldon, I probably won't have to watch. So that's fine. That's fine.
Okay.
Now the love is gone. The love affair is over. We're talking about, of course, the Royals, the love affair, Harry and Meghan and all that stuff. They tried to capitalize on it, but they didn't strike fast enough because Meghan Markle, who had inked that deal with Netflix. She's got the
$100 million deal with Netflix.
The show came out, and it's not great.
Oh gosh. Yeah, everything that they have done under that deal has really not gone well. Harry had his I think it was a thing about polo last year that didn't do very well. They had a whole thing about their lives at one point, and the biggest well, let's just say non-diamond in the crown was with love, Meghan. Yes, the Meghan Markle show where they tried to make her into Martha Stewart. And baby, it bombed. Oh, it bombed worse than anybody realized.
Not even even good. No.
The data came out. Netflix revealed that from January 2025 until June 2025, it was ranked 383rd place when it came to views.
Oh.
It had a total of 5.3 million views. Now, I want to just give you a comparison. A popular Netflix show, Wednesday, has 252 million views.
Oh.
Yeah, you can do the math, man.
45
you can
times,
do the math.
45 times the viewership on Wednesday. And man, so they're trying to make her out to be the new modern day Martha Stewart for her generation. Is that it?
Yeah, and she's being rejected hard. And here's what happened. Netflix made an announcement this week. They are not renewing that $100 million deal. Now, the $100 million deal was exclusivity, that they would get first crack at anything that Harry and Meghan were putting together for TV programming, or movies that would be on Netflix, whatever.
Right.
And that deal has run out. And Netflix said, "Yeah, we're good. We'll talk to you if you have something. But if you want to shop that around to other people, we're okay with it."
$100 million. My gosh.
Yeah.
Well, that's I guess it couldn't have happened to a nicer couple, I guess, at this point. I mean, I just don't even care at this point. It's just so crazy to me.
Yeah, I've seen the show, and it's so forced, and so it just feels so phony and fake. I'm sorry. I gotta tell you, it just feels bad. It just feels like she's trying to wedge herself into a shoe that she does not fit in. It doesn't feel like Meghan Markle. Like, how some people just come off as phony on TV? That's how it feels.
Well, isn't she?
I'm telling you, she should just get angry and be herself and just let it rip. I bet people would love that a lot more.
I mean, wasn't she an actress before this whole thing got started?
She's an actress. She was in Suits. That was her big thing. And and she's not a bad actress. I mean, she was good in Suits, and she did other stuff along the way. And she was one of the models on was it Deal or No Deal? I think that's what the one that Howie Mandel did. She was one of the banker women that would hold the briefcase, and she really propelled her career from there. And I just want to see the real Meghan Markle. You know what? Let us see warts and all. Let us see the anger. Let us see the rage. Let us see the real you, because we know it's in there. And if I'm telling you right now, if she unleashed that, I bet people will be like, I can respect the honesty.
Yeah, or they just like the spectacle. All right, well, let's move on. Let's move on to the movies. No Happy Gilmore 2 today because Netflix didn't give you the screener. What's up with that?
No, they haven't given anybody the screener from what I can tell. So I did not have enough time this morning to watch it so we could talk about it. So we will talk about it eventually.
All
okay.
right.
I mean, listen, it doesn't sound like a bad idea. I mean, the whole premise is that Adam Sandler has been in retirement, and his daughter, he needs some money for his daughter, so he's going back out on the golf tour, and all the crazy characters will be back, and he'll be just as goofy and silly as he was the first time around. And Happy Gilmore wasn't a bad movie. I don't know why they're trying to hide like this. What do they think they're really going to stop anybody who wants to see an Adam Sandler movie?
Exactly.
I mean, come on. There's nothing I could say that will deter you if you're already interested. I know that. Netflix should know that. Adam Sandler totally knows that. I don't get it, man. Just stop playing the games.
Well, we'll see what happens with that. We're going to just quick honorable mention Billy Joel, and So It Goes. It's a 2-part documentary. Part 2 comes out this week. So that's, if you like Billy Joel, that's out there.
I love it.
It was
good.
I
love it. I'm telling you, it is fantastic. The first part was 2.5 hours, and it is an in-depth look at his life. And the first 2.5 hours are really like the start of his career until about 1982. And the second part is going to be the rest of his career.
Okay.
I'm telling you, you learn things you never knew. You see a great portrait of this guy and the decisions he made and the things that happened to him along the way. It's brilliant. I loved it.
All right. Well, we got about 90 seconds here. That leaves us with the Fantastic Four: First Steps. This is the new reboot. Hit me with it.
God, Superman was so much more fun and better.
Oh,
and I hate doing that because I don't think it's always fair to compare movies like that. But I feel like there was a role reversal between the DC movie and the Marvel movie. So here in Fantastic Four, I just felt like it was bland. Like there's just not a lot of chemistry between this cast. I mean, story's decent. The challenge is decent, right? That we see them in this really cool, almost futuristic 1960s looking world where they are approached by, yes, the Silver Surfer, and they are told that their planet is going to be destroyed, and now they must battle the Silver Surfer and Galactus. And Galactus offers a deal that they cannot accept. And now they're forced into a horrible position. I'm at like 1.5 waffles. I just wanted to be more excited. I wanted to have more fun. I wanted to have a lot more just energy in this movie. It just feels bland.
Man, I would say that franchise is cursed because there hasn't been a decent Fantastic Four movie ever, unfortunately.
No.
And that's just the truth. All right, Willie Waffle, wafflemovies.com. Folks, we are out of time for today. We will see you on Monday. Be kind, love one another, live well. We'll see you then. You know, I thought their take on the, like you said, the future, futuristic. I thought that was kind of a cool take. I said, it
looks awesome.
Yeah, that would be that's a good thing to give them to that, and really be able to play on that. And it's got good actors in it. I thought, this would be great. Silver Surfer, this would be one of the first, one of the big time Silver Surfers actually on the big screen. I mean, I thought this would be a great opportunity. How do they miss on this?
Yeah, I think just because it feels like they're painting by numbers, like I keep falling back on. I want more chemistry among the cast. I want them. They're trying to sell us through this whole movie that they're a family, and they are a family. I mean, Reed Richards and Sue Storm are married, and Johnny is her brother, and Ben is of course best friends with Reed. I mean, they're all pals, right? They should have that chemistry. They should have that fun. But I felt like that was what was missing. That excitement, that spark, that energy. It didn't feel like it was there. The whole movie feels very, very heavy. And And granted, it's a heavy material, but you've got to find moments to lighten it up and to get us more excited. And visually, yeah, looks stunning, looks fantastic. I love it. Even the plot line is fine. They're offered a deal that they could never take from the evil Galactus, and now they've got to come up with a way to defeat this evil villain that seems unbeatable. Everybody on Earth is worried that they can't do it. They're worried they can't do it. You're the audience worried that they can't do it. And so they're overcoming the odds, and that's very nice, and they're fighting, and that's very nice. But I never really got connected. I never felt excited. Not like I did with Superman. Superman was a lot more fun. Superman was a lot more exciting. Superman had better scenes, better characters. This movie just, it just feels like we've got to fit it into the puzzle. We're bringing them all together for Doomsday, so we have to give them a movie. And we've got, the other Marvel movies that are coming along and developing the other characters. And this is where I think this is where the superhero fatigue really kicks in. I've been down this road before. We know where it's going.
Right.
It's not special anymore.
Yeah, and I wonder because even I can't remember which one. I think it was the Avengers, the actual Avengers movie where Tony Stark takes the missile into space and all that kind of stuff. It had some dark. I mean, there was some dark stuff there. I mean, there was some dark overtones, but they still kept it light. They still had fun. They still, and I think in some places Marvel has kind of lost that in some ways.
I think they did. I mean, Thunderbolts, I think, had it more than anybody else. And I think that was a sign to them, like, hey, let's pick it up. Let's start being Marvel again. But I think you hit something on the head, and I really believe this much. I think like you do too. The Fantastic Four just is hard to develop. It is hard to make a movie about the Fantastic Four. I mean, they had one movie that was so bad it never saw the light of day. They had the other movies with Fox that just didn't go very well. They had another stab at it, like about 10 years ago, where they tried to revive the franchise. That didn't do very well. I mean, there's just something about that franchise, about those characters that nobody can really put their finger on and convert their comic success into movie success.
Right. Yeah. No, it's a problem. I really would love to see something like that, really take off, but it is what it is. I guess that's we'll see. It's got a pretty good audience score. The critics are panning it, but it's got a pretty good audience score. We'll have to see what it looks like. Maybe it'll be the best of the batch, but that again, in some ways is not saying much. So it's just, that's kind of a tough situation. All right.
Yeah, I know. It's like being the best prisoner. Like, I committed a crime, but I've been the nicest person in prison you've ever met.
That's right. I'm a model prisoner. All right. Willie, what are we looking at next week? Quickly here.
Next week is Liam Neeson and Pamela Anderson in The Naked Gun.
I don't know. I can't take him seriously.
I don't either. I can't either.
Can't take him seriously. All right, Willie, thanks for coming on board. Folks, we are out of time for today. We will see you on Monday. Be kind, love one another, live well. We'll see you guys later.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.
Well,